Hi everyone, this is Ibrahim Shishubor and this is the third video I'm making in a series on the debate that Dr. Sam Harris had on the Young Turks channel. And in my other videos I discussed some main points that he made, but this video is going to be out the main fundamental issue that he and Cenk Uygur were arguing about. Now you have to see the video and I urge you to do it because it's a very interactive and challenging video. But in my view, there are a lot of basic flaws in it. Now, what Sam Harris was saying, and the way he presented his case and his arguments, everything was said about proving the fact that when people do bad things, there's a variety, and this conclusion was made more clear by his argument with Cenk. What he set out to prove is that there are different motives for people who do good and bad things. But when people do bad things, other than the Muslims, there's a variety of things as well, and it's acceptable. But in the Islamic sense, when Muslims do bad things, it's mostly based on the doctrine of Islam. The main reason, the property is Islam and Islamic doctrine, Islamic beliefs, Islamic teachings. And in other cases there may be things as well, but in Islam, compared to other religions, Islam is the number one reason, and the Islamic beliefs is the number one reason. Beliefs such as the jihad and the martyrdom and the heaven, and the case of the legacy of Muhammad, and the verses in the Quran that talk about the killing of the infidels and how you should treat the non-believers and things like this. And the wars that were waged and things like that. They were saying that this is the if you want to be a literary Muslim, by the word of Quran Muslim, this is exactly how you would end up, or at most, this is the closest case scenario that you would end up, like ISIL or ISIS or whatever you like to call them. And you have to believe that. So I'll say it again. He tries to make this conclusion that Islamic teachings and doctrine are the main reason. There may be a lot of other reasons as well, but this is the main reason that makes most of the Muslims who do terrorist acts or things like this, and the jihadists and terrorists and things like this, do the things that they do. Cenk tries to argue with him and says that there are other reasons which are the main reasons. He also believes that Islamic teachings and doctrines are also the reasons in this, but there are other reasons which are geopolitical, nationalistic reasons, economic reasons, and so on and so on. What they're arguing is the priorities. Cenk believes Islam is not the first reason why they do this, and Sam says no, it is the first and the major reason why they have any motive for doing this. So, and then now there are two things that I want to discuss here. First of all is I'm not saying this is, of course, this is the point that I like to argue with, and I don't agree with Sam Harris. I don't agree with Cenk as well, but there are 2 points that I like to make. First of all is, once again, I'm going to say this again, I am not going to talk about defending Islam or Muhammad or whatever. There is nothing. I want to talk about an ideology. It's come from an alien planet. We're trying to discuss it. So imagine those terms. First of all, I'm not saying, as Cenk I don't think would be saying, said something like this, that it is every Muslim who does such acts, Islam is not their first priority. No, they may be Muslims, which, according to what Sam Harris says, Islam is the first motivation, the major motivation for doing these acts. And this is the part where we argue. This is where we say it's not the most case scenario. There may be some do it, but most don't do it for these reasons. This is what Cenk is trying to argue, and I'm mostly in favor of him. There's just one thing I would argue with, which is, I think it's their own belief and their own reading of Islam that causes them to do this. I don't believe that Islam it is the doctrine of Islam which profiteers such actions, but it's okay. That's another topic for another session and another video, so I'm not going to talk about it. I'm just going to accept it. So this is the main point. I want to show you completely, so you can completely grasp and it becomes completely clear what the argument is about. So the argument is Islam the first and major motive for Muslims to do acts of terrorism? The way I'm going to get into this is, and Sam brings about his argument by telling about the wars the Prophet made, about his legacy, and talking about the verses in the Quran that talk about killing the non-believers and other things and beheading them, and of course the examples of the Muslims and things like this. And he puts it all to get pieces of the puzzle together, and he comes out with a conclusion that it is Islam. And that is the major reason. And of course, there's another very important thing to say this, and it comes up in debate somehow, where Cenk argues that, and I believe in this, most of the times we humans don't realize what our true motives are. We don't understand what they are. But I'm not even going to argue on this. It's not something that we can exactly prove so scientifically and so easy. But just have in mind, it happens sometimes. Just have it in mind somewhere, and we may come back to it later. So let's talk about the doctrine of Islam. The doctrine of Islam says that we believe in one God, and then they say that this is what the Quran says. At least what I've read of the Quran, Islam says there is one God. There have been many prophets who have come. Muhammad is the last prophet. There will be no prophet after him. They believe in every single prophet, at least the ones that are most of them, I think, that the Christians believe and the Jews believe. Their names have come in the Old Testament and the New Testament and many other books as well. David's book and others. Then they say, and it's important, a nice fact to know, that Islam doesn't divide religions into Christianity, Judaism, Islam, and things like this, Mohammedism or whatever. Islam considers all religion to be called Islam. They are all Islam in the meaning of the surrender, willful surrender, willing surrender to the will of Allah, the Creator. So, this is what Islam believes in. And the further you get away from this, and the Quran is a holy book and so on, the further you get away from this, the more you oppose the Islamic ideology and belief and doctrine. So, someone who believes in God, believes in Moses, the other prophets, believes in Jesus, but does not believe in Muhammad, believes in the Bible, believes in the Torah, the Old Testament, things like this, he is closer, he's just a step away, or a few steps away from Islam. Jews and Islam says that the Christians are the closest people to you, Muslims. You go further away. Now, as you get further away, you see we have those who believe in a multitude of gods, who believe in idol worship, who don't believe in the prophets like Moses and Jesus and Muhammad and things, Moses, Jesus, and the other ones that have been in they are the mutual prophets believed by the Abrahamic religions. And you get further away, those who don't believe in God, those who believe in whatever, the Hindus and the Buddhas, and their their explanation and their belief in the Creator, and those who don't believe in God. So, this is what I'm saying this is my logic. The Western world is mainly known as Christian world. The Europe and Northern America, they're known as the Christian world, especially to the Muslims. So, if it's the Islamic doctrine that is the main profiteer and motivator for the Muslims to go to war and to kill, then the Westerners, which we don't dissect, just like you don't dissect the Muslim world or the Hindus or the Muslims. Oh, there are atheists here, there's evangelicals there, there's Catholic there here, or the Mormons there. No, the Western world, and they see it as a whole. So why is it that you hear about this closest faith and belief to the Muslim doctrine? These are the people that have almost all the attacks. I haven't heard of anything else, but we'll say there are some to other believers and other people from other places of the world, other regions. But these are the people that always get attacked by the ones we call Muslims, the closest people and the closest belief to the Islamic belief and doctrine. How does that make sense? How does that make sense? When have we ever heard, there was some time ago, there were like 13 British tourists were killed by the beach. When have you heard about, this news, you turn on the TV and it says that 13 Japanese tourists were killed somewhere in northern Africa? Where have you heard that? Or about, or Hindus or whatever, or Chinese. Why? They are the furthest thing away, probably, to the Islamic doctrine and belief. So why is it we never hear things? Or even if there are, I'm not saying there aren't because I don't know if there are, it is unaccountably nothing in a proportion of size to the attacks that are made to the Christians, at least what the Muslims believe are the Christians, the closest people to the Islamic doctrine. This is a question that I just can't swallow. I can't understand. This is a contradiction. If Islamic theory, Islamic ideology, doctrine, beliefs are the main reason for the acts that Muslims do, which, okay, I'll accept for argument's sake to call terrorism act, why are they done on the people who are the closest to the Islamic beliefs? And why do we never have any, or so small that we don't even hear, I haven't heard about it, I don't know if you have, I'd like for you to name some examples if you have, and definitely they're not going to be even comparable to the ones that are made to the Christians, the believed Christians, to the compared to the ones that are done to the, if they are done, compared to the ones to the like the Hindus and the Buddhists and things like that. Why are there? Why is this difference between them? I think this completely proves the fact that Islam is not the main motivator. You can't just dissect something. It's always their belief, and they have done it for these things, and because they say it's for Islam, and they say the Shahada, or the Ashhadu an Allah, they're saying no God but one God, and Muhammad is the Prophet before this. This is done for in the name of Islam and for Islamic reasons. Why do we never see this against the Eastern, Far East, maybe people from the Far East region, or the Australians or something like that? Even if they've seen as the whole of the West, which is a Christian region all in all together, seen as the Christian world. So I think it's very obvious why there's this animosity and this hatred towards the Western world. It's because of colonization. Their colonist countries, they came to this part of the world, and they tore this part of the world apart. They took the riches, they dissected it. They created the borders after World War I. They created borders for themselves. Robert Fisk, who is like, I think he should be glorified in your country as a British citizen. He is I think he works for the Independent. He has this great discussion where he talks how the British Empire and the French and the Americans and and the other countries, great powers, dissected the Middle East. So we have countries, but we don't have singular nations in places like Iraq or Lebanon or whatever. So, and then we say, what is all the fighting about? In domestic wars, why are they having domestic war? And then they say, why do they hate us? How many Middle Eastern and Islamic tyrants have been backed by the Western powers. The only time, it's so obvious, I don't even want to talk about it. The US talks about, and I'm not going to just criticize the US for being bad or something like this. This is the root, because we are talking about the animosity and the hatred and the feelings, the mutual hatred that is between, and the fear that is between the West, seen as Europe and Northern America, and the US and the Islamic states. So, how many tyrants, how many dictators in the Middle East did the US and the European countries support? Was there anyone that the US did not support who was willing to form a partnership with them? Of course, they might have had, or they might become enemies with those who were unwilling to share the riches of what they had. We're talking about dictators. Don't forget this. But anyone who decided to cooperate with the US would give it its full support. And then the US talks about spreading democracy, and we have to bring democratic changes to other countries. Only when dictators like Pervez Musharraf, Hosni Mubarak, and other dictators as well, Ben Ali or whatever, only when they were being toppled, and only when it was obvious that they were not going to survive, and there was so much international and domestic pressure on the U.S. government, would the U.S. government stop defending those? So I'm not going to talk about the U.S. foreign policy. I may talk about it once in the near future, but what I want to say is that when you track the history of the relations between the Middle Eastern and Islamic nations and the Christian West, as in the US and Europe, you see that there is a deep hatred, fundamental nationalistic feelings, and in the Middle East and the Muslims, which when feelings like this erupt, you can't dissect it and say this part is because of the colonization of my country, this part is for my religion. They all go into one whole sphere, and it erupts as there. And you make a label, you put a label on it. And the best things that in Muslim country, and it depends, sometimes it's consciously, sometimes it's not. But even if it's consciously, you do the most, you put the most profitable label on it that you can, the label that will bring you the most supporters and the most believers and the most backers of your ideology and your movement. And of course, in the Islamic world, it's the belief in Islam that the West is attacking Islam. Because to talk about, they're stealing your riches and they're dissecting your country and this is not fair, this is not what is best for your country, and trying to evoke these movements, at least what they think, the people who do these things think is not good enough compared to evoking the Islamic beliefs and feelings that the people of the region have. So I think it's an obvious point, and I made my conclusion and my point and my argument, I think, in the first part where it was obvious. I told you, if it's the Islamic doctrine, then they should be, at least their priority should be the people who are the farthest away from the Islamic beliefs and ideology. But as you see, the only people, or at least the people who are the most victims of these acts are the Westerners. And the Westerners are believed as the Christian world, and the Christians are the closest people to the Islamic belief. It is obvious in everything that Islam believes that the Christians are, and if it wasn't enough, there is verses in the Quran that says that Christians are the closest people to you. So this is my argument. I would like to say that Sam Harris, unfortunately, I've never heard. There is one person who I've heard has talked about this, but it hasn't really been shown and talked about, and hasn't been completely told to everyone else. But and he doesn't talk about it, I think, as clear as I do, and I hope people will, because it's such an obvious point, and I hope that Mr. Harris realize, and other people, who use this argument against Islam and the Muslims, realize that it just doesn't make sense. It's a contradiction. It's an obvious contradiction. And I would like to say that. I would like to say that. Huh? Gee? I would like to say that. So I would like Mr. Harris or Cenk had an argument saying that had an answer for my argument and for my debate. I would really like to hear it, because of course I may be wrong, and this is just my views, and I would like it if you would. I hope you like the video, and the next segment I'm going to make is going to be about how again there's going to be the next part of my criticism of this debate, where Sam Harris talks about how Islam calls on the killing of the non-believers and the pagans and the infidels, and he uses takes him out of context, I think, and I'll talk about this. So that was my video, and I hope you enjoyed it, and if you liked it, please share this video, and I really would like to read your comments, and I'll promise to answer as much of them as I can. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.